One beautiful spring day in 1952, or perhaps it was a cool, breezy autumn day. No one really remembers for sure. What they do remember from that day at Elysian Heights Elementary was that was the first time that the cat entered the classroom. The classroom that would become the proper name of the cat for the next 15 plus years. Room 8. On that particular school day, Room 8 just wandered into what was then the 6th grade classroom just before recess. The skinny gray-striped tabby made himself right at home, strutting across the tops of the students' desks, somewhat disrupting the daily class curriculum. The children's laughter and delight with the cat's behavior didn't help with their studies either. Virginia Finley, the teacher, decided that because it was nearly time for recess, the skinny cat could be given some milk while the children went outside to play. Then perhaps the cat would move along. Of course, anyone that's ever met a cat knows that giving a cat milk rarely makes it move along.
When they got back from recess, they found that Room 8 had eaten all of their lunches, and this is the day of sack lunches and lunch pails. Obviously, he couldn't get in the lunch pails, but he raided the sack lunches and was fast asleep on someone's desk.
The children were nice enough to let the visiting cat sleep it off, as they were all curious at what he would do next. Miss Finley allowed it, somewhat curious herself. What the cat did do next was follow all of the children outside when it was time for their lunch break. The cat was so skinny and so friendly that the children couldn't help but share what was left of their lunches with him. When they returned to the class, the cat followed them in. Miss Finley announced that there couldn't be any more distractions from the cat. He was put out into the hallway, and the classroom door closed behind him. After a short while, everyone heard a series of crashes. They all turned to see that the cat had circled around outside and had jumped back into the classroom through an open window and through the Venetian blinds.
The windows at that time didn't have security features on them. It was probably warm out. The window was open to allow some ventilation. There was no air conditioning. Room 8 came in, walked around the class.
The fire escape window is one that turns open, so easy access if it's left open. Most of the windows don't work anymore except for the middle one. But yes, these are the windows.
Miss Finley accepted defeat graciously and allowed the cat to stay. The next day, the cat showed up again as the morning school bell rang. He slept on the desks and joined the children for recess and lunchtime, where he ate lunch with them for the second day. He then returned to the classroom with them to finish out the school day. As he was given a drink of water from the faucet in the wash basin, students and teacher all agreed that he probably didn't have a home, as one of the children said that he saw the cat rummaging through the garbage cans one night. It was decided that this little skinny tabby's home was now the school until they could find him a proper home. Everyone also agreed that the cat needed a proper name to go with his new home. It was quickly decided that since this was his favorite place in the school, that he shall be called Room 8.
The image that comes to my mind immediately is that kind of, what can I say? Not exactly rotund, but well-fed, kind of gray, tabby-ish cat in the Echo Park Avenue doorway. That's the first image that comes up into my mind. The next image I have of him is laying on a desktop literally in Room 8.
When the school day ended, Room 8 disappeared into the hills for the night. However, the very next morning, he was there, ready for the school day at the first bell. And so it would be every school day, rain or shine, for over the next 15 years.
When a thin tabby strolled into a 6th grade classroom in California, the children were delighted. They gave him some milk and shared their lunches with him. He came back the next day and followed them inside, and there he stayed.
It was always a mystery where this cat wound up.
This is a traditional school year. Schools ended in June. It would start up again in September. And during the summer months, the story is that roommate would live in the neighborhood, and he would return to school on the first day of school, much like the swallows returning to Capistrano.
My name is Dave Pierce, and I attended school here in the 1960s. He would come and go through the windows sometimes. In those days, we didn't have all these security screens.
Roommate would walk the Elysian Heights school halls and classrooms, making himself at home day after day. He would always have time to stop for a pet from the students and faculty. Occasionally, he would sit in the hallway and greet the passing students with a loud meow. But there was the occasional time that he would run and hide when the substitute nurse was at the school. She would always catch him and clean his ears.
Apparently, the house he lived in had a boarder who mistreated him, and roommate was not happy.
The students gave roommate so many treats that he soon went from scrawny to plump. The school thought it best to appoint one very lucky student to be his official cat feeder.
One of the lucky 6th graders would be designated cat feeder. This highly coveted role would be repeated year after year to a new 6th grader with each new school year. The role of the cat feeder was to present room 8 with his lunch every day. This occurred at the same time as everyone else's lunch schedule, unless room 8 was particularly hungry. On those days, room 8 would find the cat feeder and meow loudly for his early lunch.
So the cat feeder was typically a 6th grader, generally a girl, but there were a few boys. And I don't remember much about our student government as a student here, but the cat feeder was the most prestigious position a student could have in the school, because the cat feeder not only got to feed room 8, but he or she fed room 8 in the most secret of all spots, which was the teacher's room.
The teacher of that 6th grade class is like, well, if we're gonna have this cat come into the school, we need to have someone who's official and is the cat feeder. And so roommate the classroom was a 6th grade classroom, and so they have someone who is in charge of feeding the cat.
Miss Mason, didn't know much about her private life, and she was a very private person. But this place was her world, and she also loved animals. She loved cats. So how wonderful that, the principal says, oh, fine. Yeah, let the cat in. Go ahead and feed the cat. As a matter of fact, we need a cat feeder. So roommate 6th grade, you guys are the most mature and the most responsible. You pick the people, you vote among the people who's going to be the cat feeder.
Roommate no longer shared the lunches with the children on the playground. He was now part of the faculty. The second special duty that came with the honor of being cat feeder was that each year for the class picture, the cat feeder got to hold room 8 on their lap for the annual photograph.
Yeah, at the end of the year, they get to take a picture holding room 8, which is super special. We have one in the library of one of the classes.
Room 8 also got his individual photograph included with the children in his class.
I had some interactions with room 8. He wasn't the most demonstrative of cats, but neither was he, I wouldn't call him, he was a cat. Cats will deign to allow you, within their personal space or not. And I had more of I had more of a sense of being an object in his world, rather than the other way around. This was my world, and that's a cat that belongs here, somehow is attached. It's more that this school and all the things that went with it belonged to the cat.
We had a lot of rules here at Elysian when I was a student. The usual ones: don't talk in class, don't run in the hallways. We had a kind of a weird rule that I still laugh at. During lunchtime, we had a period of silence. No talking for the first 10 minutes of lunch.
However, there was one rule that towered above all others. A rule that was rarely broken, and never for a second time. It was known simply as the rule.
The basic rule was, don't bother the cat. And amazingly, nobody did.
There were some occasions when the rule was somewhat difficult to follow, especially after lunch when roommate was particularly sleepy and tended to fall asleep on the students' desks. He would sprawl out across the very assignments the students were attempting to complete.
The children felt privileged to have roommates sleep on their sweater.
This place, I get a little misty when I think about it now. There were some really special human beings. Beverly Mason. And because of Beverly Mason, we had a garden. Each class was assigned its own plot in the garden. And each year we would decide, that class would decide what they were going to grow in the gardens.
This was a special place and a special time. Miss Mason loved this school. What I remember about Beverly Mason was barrettes. She always wore barrettes in her hair. And she always had red lipstick on, and she was always made up. I remember her mom looked like Minnie Pearl. She had this huge hat. She would come in, and she would have this shrieking voice. And I don't know if her mom actually said howdy, but she reminded me of Minnie Pearl. Miss Mason, like I said, could be really sweet. She was often very sweet, but she could also be very stern. I remember when Johnson died, we all had to get around the flag and do the ceremony, and we were goofing off. Oh, she got so mad. I remember she bawled us out. We have to respect the flag and respect the deceased president. And, we were red diaper babies, so we were like, whatever. But Miss Mason, she made sure that we had orchestra. She made sure we had chorus. She made sure we had like a virtual petting zoo on campus where we could interact with goats and chickens and Goldie the pony. And she made sure that this school was not just about academics, but it was like a community center. We would come here. I loved coming here at night. There was nothing like when we were putting on a holiday pageant or a spring pageant, and all of us walking down from these hills and coming to the auditorium at night, and me thinking, oh, it's special, I'm going to school at night,
Beverly Mason's 25-year tenure as the school's principal began in 1957. By this time, roommate had been a fixture at the school going on 5 years. Braving dogs and cars, wind and rain, roommate would show up to each school day. When school was out, he would disappear into the hills. No one knew where he spent his summer vacations or Christmas or Easter breaks. Once, a reporter came to the school to photograph roommate during an Easter break. He was told that roommate was on vacation and would return when the school was back in session. Every September on the first day of school, when the morning bell rang, room 8 could be seen running down Baxter Street and into the school to join his classmates.
Over the years, more and more news media would come and show up, and they would assemble and watch roommate return to Elysian Heights School.
After a while, the local community and news would learn about this most unusual cat.
The thing that made Roommate famous was the fact that he was like the swallows of Capistrano. The minute school started, the day the first bell rang, down the street he'd come. It got so that on the first day of school each year, every newspaper and television station in town showed up to watch this cat appear from out of the hills.
I don't recall being present when he showed up for the first day of school or the news being here for those kind of things. I remember news being here, so I don't remember like news cameras at the entrances. I do remember a news crew being in room 8, and room 8 being either on the floor, on a table, because it happened several times.
My name is Dan West. I'm a musician, composer, arranger, songwriter, and pianist. And I fell in love with room 8 in August of 2016.
Hi, my name is Azalea Snail. I'm a musician and a cat lover, and I'm married to Dan West. And so I lived at the top of Echo Park Avenue since I moved in December '99. And I just loved the neighborhood at the time. I had come from New York City, which was becoming very gentrified. And I love that Echo Park still had this kind of bohemian feel. And so one of the things that I loved as I would go up Echo Park Avenue is this school that had this giant mural of a cat. And I always thought, this is really cool. And I didn't know the story of the cat. So it was when Dan West and I started dating. And he was started to be fascinated, and so we just made it a little project, like, we got to find out who this cat is.
She, for 12 years, lived at the top of Echo Park Avenue. And she had a couple of motor scooters that were actually the first electric scooters, and we used to ride them up and down that hill all the time. We'd go and have lunch or dinner at Tex Restaurant, and then come back up, and every time we'd pass the mural on the side of the auditorium. And I'd always ask her, I'd say, look at the cat. Who is that cat?
I think many of us students, he wasn't like a celebrity. He was just one of us, somewhere between a student and a faculty member. In some of the photos that we have, it shows him as with the faculty, members of the faculty. Others, he shows as a student. When I went on to 7th grade, I went to Thomas Starr King Junior High in 7th grade, and in talking about room 8, we then got to realize he was a celebrity, because to us, he was a schoolmate. But, you went to school with room 8? Wow, that's so cool. He was famous.
Once, after seeing a story about room 8 on the news, the school got a phone call from a sweet little old lady that once lived across the street from the school. She was convinced that room 8 was her old cat that had run away years ago when a mean tenant threw rocks at him.
She came down to the school to look at the cat and said, "That's my Tommy." She showed us a picture of her cat, and room 8 sure did look like him.
Until that moment, Anna Schultz never knew what became of her cat, fearing that perhaps the coyotes had got him. Happy to learn that her old Tommy was now the famous room 8, the celebrity cat, Mrs. Schultz left the school content that her old friend was safe and happy at Elysian Heights Elementary School. As time went on, room 8's fame continued to grow. The children's magazine, My Weekly Reader, featured a story on room 8. Shortly after that, in 1962, Look magazine featured a 3-page pictorial on the very increasingly famous school cat.
Look was a news picture magazine, a contemporary of Life magazine, which was much larger. But Richard Hewitt was a photographer. He photographed room 8 here at the school in about 1960 or so. And they did a multi-page spread on room 8, the school cat.
Room 8 made appearances on the television show Art Linkletter's House Party and the NBC documentary Big Cats, Little Cats. That's when the mail started coming in. Cards and letters addressed to room 8. First dozens, then hundreds, and even thousands.
Yeah, and so it gets to be bigger and bigger. Local news reaches out, they want to talk to school, and then eventually newspapers get a hold of him. And then kids all around the world are sending letters to room 8. We read a book today that was the 30 Fearless Felines, and they talked about how it wasn't addressed to the school, it was addressed to room 8, Los Angeles, California. But eventually those letters got to him because he was just that famous. They're like, yeah, we know exactly where this is going.
At one point he was getting, 100 fan letters a day. He got 10,000 letters over the course of his life. People would address them, room 8, Los Angeles, California, and they got to him.
Well, this cat had fan mail, and fans from all over the world. This was before the existence of the internet. How did this school come to the awareness of the greater world, the world at large, and to have fans, from countries like Iceland, what have you.
We would get mail about a roommate, and we were assigned a pen pal. So I had one from Japan. I had a pen pal from, like Minnesota. And I even had a pen pal, or someone in the class had a pen pal from Russia, from Soviet, and it was Soviet Russia at the time. And this was so, there was such it bent in my mind because it was the middle of the Cold War, and I was like, how did they get a letter out of Russia?
Now, Roommate had a number of other assistants too. Miss Mason drafted 5th and 6th grade students later on to be his secretaries, because Roommate started receiving lots and lots and lots of fan mail. And Roommate was good at many things, but he wasn't really good at answering correspondence. And his secretaries answered correspondence on his behalf, and they had a stamp of Roommate's paw print that they would sign it with both their name and Roommate's paw print.
It got to the point where we were sending at least 1,000 Christmas cards a year.
Roommate received over 10,000 fan letters from nearly every state in the country, as well as some overseas countries. Roommate would often receive more than 100 letters in a day. Some of these correspondences were simply addressed to The Cat, Los Angeles, California, or Roommate, Los Angeles, California. They all found their way to Elysian Heights Elementary School, where each of them were answered.
All of my children always answered all of the letters. You have no idea what it did for adults as well as youngsters, because so many people who picked up on this were lonely elderly people, some in nursing homes. They had no one to write to.
It was claimed that Roommate could read at a 2nd grade level. But being a cat, he certainly couldn't write. So on behalf of Los Angeles' most famous cat, the children of Elysian Heights answered all of Roommate's letters and fan mail.
I don't recall anything specific that I wrote. Often it was copying so this will be today's response. So it's basically a form letter, but we would, hand transcribe the form letter and sign it.
Yeah, I remember there was a sack. It was a sack. It was a pretty sizable sack. I could not spell. I could not write. So I was quickly excused from the activity. But we were all assigned pen pals, and we did what we could. I remember drawing pictures is what I did. Yeah.
At the time, we didn't know any better. This is just the way things were. There was Roommate. We took care of Roommate. We didn't bother Roommate. We got to write letters to people we didn't know and pretend that we were Roommate, writing to them. And of course, the people writing the letters, getting the letters back, knew that it was a human being writing it. But, we wrote it in the spirit of the cat, and the cat was signed with a paw print. It was a rubber stamp, and that was, since we had the imprint of the cat's hand. So it was actually, Roommate's, stamp of his actual paw print.
On June 11th, 1964, Roommate's celebrity reached such a level that he put his paw prints in cement in front of the school. Mr. Sam Ross, the school's custodian, gently lowered Roommate's paws into the wet cement. The crowd of faculty and students, as well as the local news, were there to witness the historic event.
Everyone cheered. Television cameras rolled as he walked across the wet cement with his tail and head high.
I don't remember Mr. Ross. I've heard the stories of Mr. Ross holding the cat and helping him imprint his footprints. I'm sorry, I don't remember that. I don't have a clear memory of that.
Roommate became such a celebrity that his paw prints were embedded in wet cement in front of the school.
Each year, a birthday party was held for Roommate. He would receive a cat toy, and the children would have punch and cookies. In 1966, a children's book was published called A Cat Called Roommate.
Miss Beverly Mason, the principal, a teacher by the name of Virginia Finley, who was Roommate's original teacher. She was the teacher in the classroom when Roommate arrived, and an art teacher by the name of Valerie Martin. And Valerie Martin did the wonderful illustrations for the book. Virginia Finley and Beverly Mason did the text narrative, and it's basically an illustrated biography of Roommate's life and his life at the school.
All right, how you doing? I'm Paul. My son went to this school, and not a week ago, my friend Loopy, who grew up on this house on the corner, and I went into the office and took a look at the most pristine copy of the Roommate Cat book, A Cat Called Roommate. And I actually told one of the guys whose kindergarten kid goes here now about the book, and he's now looking into possibly getting it republished, which is really cool. And I grew up on the East Coast, and I remember reading the book, or A Cat Called Roommate, when I was a kid.
The first time I read it, it recounted some stories about Roommate getting stuck on the roof or different things, stories that I kind of remember from childhood.
Of course. I think they used to give it out for, if you won an award, you would get a copy or something like that.
Included in his many tales was the time he got into a cat fight during the night when a mean cat bit his ear, or how he would sit in the school garden and watch the bees and sniff the flowers.
I think it's 5 copies of A Cat Called Roommate in the library, so it was really easy to pick it up and to read it. And when I started with my classroom this year, teaching 2nd grade, I was teaching upper grade for a long time. When I moved down to 2nd grade, it only felt right to start the year off with reading A Cat Called Roommate, since we're in the classroom.
Things that happened after I left the school, some of his illnesses and such were in there. He was still alive when the book was published in 1966 by Putnam's. It was basically a regional book. It sold for, as I recall, about $2.50. Proceeds, royalties, as we'd call them today, were donated back to the school to be used for library books and literacy projects. Here we are in the library. It also helped offset his veterinary bills. It paid for his food, and it also helped pay for postage for the numerous letters and such that he received.
My name is Emilio Garza. I'm the principal here at Elysian Heights Elementary. I have been the principal for the last 10 years. So I learned about the cat when I was walking around the campus on my first day, and I was noticing that there were portraits of cats everywhere. And so I started digging through some files, and I ran into the book that was written about Roommate the cat. And that's actually where I started learning about his story. And then shortly thereafter, sort of serendipitously, I got a phone call from an NPR reporter who wanted to do a story on the cat. And fortunately, I was already pretty well versed in the story, and so I was able to, you want to do a story? That's great. Yes, I know all about him. What would you like to know?
And there's is promoted from the 6th grade. I guess that's my diploma. Wow. 1977.
The book also touches on the time that Roommate developed pneumonia. He spent a few days at the veterinary clinic and almost didn't make it. His sheer will to get back to the school and be with his classmates was what ultimately pulled him through. Although he had gone from a skinny cat to a plump 16 pounds over his 10-plus years at the school, the veterinarian at the Lockhart Animal Hospital in Hollywood recommended that Roommate no longer roam the hills when school was out, and that he should spend his nights and vacations in a nice home. Miss Mason decided that honor went to Brenda Nakano and her family. They had a house across the street from the school, and she was very kind to animals. Each day at the end of school, Roommate would wait patiently for Mr. Ross to transport him safely across the street to his after-school home.
That was the first time he was willing to accept a nighttime home, though many times the neighbors helped search the hills and looked under bushes for Roommate, who hadn't arrived back at the Nakano home. Sometimes it was dark and flashlight crews were organized before he was found sleeping in a garden or visiting a neighbor. We never left for the day without knowing the cat was safe at Mrs. Nakano's.
This continued for the last 5 or 6 years of the cat's life.
And it was actually not sort of publicized to the school where this cat was being taken care of. There was some family who had the responsibility for this cat. When during the semester break and possibly in the evening, but it wasn't something that was. I think it was something like, and another thing is like we keep it quiet of who's taking care of the cat because we actually don't want a whole lot of attention placed on that family.
In his later years, Roommate would live nights, weekends, and during the summer with some of the local families, the Mitsui and the Nakano families that lived very near school. And Mr. Ross, our school custodian, would take Roommate back across the street, across Baxter Street, to whichever house he was living at the time. And he would also pick Roommate up in the morning and take him across the street to be at school throughout the day.
Mrs. Nakano remembered Roommate fondly. She said he was a quiet cat who never got into mischief, who would always wake her up on school days, but never on the weekends. News of Roommate's living situation quickly spread beyond the neighborhood. Mrs. Nakano said, one day, her husband was stopped for a traffic violation. When the policeman saw his driver's license, he said, "Oh, you're the one that has the cat." He never did give her husband a ticket. There were Halloween parties each fall, where the children would dress Roommate in costume to participate with them. Roommate would occasionally be a guest at a local cat show, always accompanied by whomever was the current, lucky, 6th grade cat feeder. But the center of all his attention was starting to get up there in cat years. Though he had recovered from his bout of pneumonia, Roommate had lost a few teeth and was slowing down a bit. Mr. Ross said it was his privilege to carry him on his lap when he was driven for his yearly doctor visit.
The medallion was a fundraiser to raise money for Roommate's various charities.
In 1968, summer school was being held for the first time in 6 years. Roommate attended every day until he became ill and was taken to the hospital. Roommate passed away peacefully on August 13, 1968, of kidney failure.
He lived a very long life. He was 21 or 22 when he died. He was born in 1947, according to Miss Mason, and he died in August of 1968.
2 days later, Roommate was laid to rest at the Los Angeles Memorial Pet Cemetery in Calabasas. There was a procession of 3 cars with 10 to 12 people from the school to the cemetery. There was a viewing of Roommate's body, curled up in his coffin, before he is laid to rest in the park section, the Garden of Eternal Rest. The Nakano family placed a heart-shaped wreath on his grave among the roses and carnations, which were Roommate's favorite flowers. His beautiful granite tombstone with his picture on it was paid for by donations from friends all over the world. At the base of the tombstone is a beautiful elegy written by Henry Fry, a touching tribute to what Roommate meant to the adults and children of Elysian Heights Elementary. Newspapers across the country carried the sad story and obituaries for the most famous cat in the world. The Amarillo Globe-Times in Texas wrote an article, "School is mourning 22-year-old tomcat." The Pasadena Star-Times said, "A familiar face will be missing from Classroom 8 in September." The Daily News in Hayward, California wrote, "Loses 9th life, LA pupils will miss Roommate." Madison, Wisconsin's Capital Times said, "Elysian Heights School won't be the same somehow."
I'll always see Roommate as he walked in the door with a meow each morning. He truly was a most unusual cat, human in many ways. I dread going back to school this fall, as it will be hard for all of us who loved him.
In the cement, the children from back in the old days in the 1960s, they wrote messages and poems to Roommate the cat when he passed away. So those can be found all around the campus.
Roommate's obituary in the Los Angeles Times by Dale Torgenson ran 3 columns, complete with a photo. When the semester started that fall, the children of Elysian Heights Elementary put down their feelings in concrete, lining the sidewalks in front of the school. Poems, remembrances, drawings, and tributes to their most beloved schoolmate, dozens of them, etched in the sidewalk of the school, where they remain to this day. His paw prints may no longer grace the school's hallways, but his legacy lives on. A fan in New York sponsored a yearly roommate art contest. A roommate bed fund was established at the Los Angeles Orthopedic Hospital. In 1972, Hetty Perry founded Roommate Memorial Cat Foundation.
It was founded by a woman by the name of Hattie Perry in Pasadena, and she was a cat lady. She liked cats. She heard about Roommate, and she asked permission to name her organization, which is a cat rescue organization, after Roommate. Beverly Mason, of course, gave her permission. The Roommate Memorial Cat Foundation is the last functioning remaining bit of Roommate's philanthropic heritage.
A painting of Roommate continues to hang in the shelter, reminding everyone of the kindness he taught people, even over a half a century since his death.
I think it was partly his perseverance and personality, but a lot of it was Miss Mason behind the scenes. She was he and he was her. He was her alter ego. So everything about Roommate was because of the benevolence and perseverance of Miss Mason, who stayed here at Elysian for many, many years. Typically, at that time, principals would rotate out about every 5 years or so. But she had perseverance. She was enormously competent. She was well respected within the school and within apparently the school system and the neighborhood. She did a lot of things for students and families and really cared about things, and she stayed here quite a long time. I believe she retired in the 1970s, and even after she retired and after Roommate's death, she continued to pursue Roommate's story, and she wrote various articles that were published in Cat Fancy magazine, other magazines and periodicals, just talking about Roommate.
This was her office. It probably looks a little bit different from when she was here. Added some furniture when I first got here to the school, but the actual walls and space are exactly where Miss Beverly Mason used to reside here on campus when she was a principal. I am positive that Roommate has been in this room because apparently she was a huge cat lover as well, and so I'm sure that he used to wander on in here and she would pet him and play with him.
Roommate continues to be mentioned in articles, podcasts, and videos. In 2018, acclaimed children's book author Kimberly Hamilton released her book, Rebel Cats, Brave Tales of Feisty Felines, which features a story on Roommate.
I have written 6 books, and my first one was about cats around the world who have done heroic things or notable things that they're still remembered 4 years later, and that book is called Fearless Felines, Tales of Courageous Cats, and one of those cats profiled in the book is Roommate.
I started his official Facebook page in 2016, in August of that year. And right away, Roger Vargo was there, and he and I just really populated it right away. I found the LA Times article, and I found some of the pictures from the Look magazine and some other, there's lots of stuff when you start digging. It's pretty amazing. I mean, this cat was a big deal.
To walk the halls of Elysian Heights Elementary today, in 2024, is to walk back in the paw prints of Room 8.
Well, he is a part of every single one of our tours, so whenever we are touring new families, we always stop at his portrait, and where several of his pictures live on our campus, and we tell the parents all about the story.
We knew that being that it was an elementary school, we wouldn't be able to just wander onto the school, obviously, so we thought to ourselves, how are we going to do this? And then I got my voting information, and I would actually vote by mail a lot, but I said, well, my voting location is at Elysian Elementary School. Well, Elysian Heights, I guess it's called Elysian Heights Elementary School. So I said, well, let's do this. And Dan said, well, I'm going to go with you. So, so we went there, and we got there, and as he said, we saw all the tributes from the different children. They really loved this cat. And so we saw all the engravings, the sidewalk engravings, and then we got to go in the school. We kind of just wandered around and saw this. There was a big showcase of different aspects of Roommate.
In the main office.
When it's in the main office, that's right. And that was open, even though it was a voting day. I guess the school was still open.
Well, we got there early, and it was good because you said, let's get there ahead of the whole rush of people, and so we were kind of wandering around for about an hour.
Yeah.
So
we did walk.
Yeah.
We walked around the school and just saw whatever we could, and then we started reading more, and we realized there was a couple of families that would feed Roommate around the corner.
Valentine Avenue.
On Valentine Avenue.
It's pictured in the book. There's actually a picture of a.
You should probably be here next to me.
Yeah,
His likeness is everywhere in the school.
He's a big part of our everyday experience on campus, and so we make sure that all of the children know the story of Roommate the cat.
From the portraits and photographs that adorn the walls to the bronze statue and mosaic paying tribute to him in the school's library. A large mural of him was painted on the side of the school in 2009. More cement tributes by the children who knew him, as well as the children of the now grown students who went to school with Roommate, can be found around the garden and the playground. Even the school's official seal proudly features Roommate the cat. It was said that there will never be another cat like him. This is certainly true. He was the right cat at the right time, at the right school, with the right people.
The cat had a school. Not so much the other way around, that the school had a cat. The cat did, care for this beast.
For 16 years, he attended Elysian Heights Elementary School with an exemplary attendance record. He taught the children to treat animals with care and compassion and how to respect others. He was a surrogate pet for many children who were not allowed to have a pet at home. He captured the hearts of the whole community and the whole world. That type of magic is rare and certainly doesn't happen all the time. The largest cement inscription of them all proudly and simply reads, Elysian Heights School, home of Roommate School Cat, 1952 to 1968.
I wonder if you could ever duplicate this magic again, because it was magic. I hope you can, because I benefited so much from living here and going to this school and knowing, and someone like Miss Mason,
Roommate, to me, represents a lot of good things about my childhood. And I can kind of think of Roommate as a folder that holds a lot of memories. So I can think about Roommate without having to refer to specific memories.
As I look back on it, I just have this sense of this, there is something magic about this place, something special.
I loved it here. I haven't moved away. I live in the same zip code, basically.
This cat had just brought together so many people, and we're still talking about him decades later. It was really important to me to show that you don't have to do huge things with your life to be notable or to leave a lasting imprint on the world, and this cat was a demonstration of that. He was just a cat that adopted these humans, came into their lives, and he changed their world.
I think we keep that spirit alive because we are such a small school that it's like we get to feel very special in our place. Because even when I was a kid, like there was always something special about Elysian Heights.
Roommate the cat is the official mascot of Elysian Heights.
I speak a lot to children at book festivals and at school author visits and stuff like that, and I often talk about Roommate. It's great in a classroom setting because I start off by, what would it be like if there was a cat right here going to school with you every day? And the children just really embrace that idea. And of course, I'm sure all the teachers are thrilled because after I leave, they're clamoring to get a school cat. But I think it would be fantastic for every kid to have a classroom cat while they were going to school.
And so just the idea of this cat that was so part of this school was just magical to us.